Dr. Amani, I am so happy to have you join me today. It's been, I don't know, a couple months since we've had a face-to-face or a Zoomish face-to-face, if that's right. Today we're talking about the elderly, and you're a geriatric psychiatrist. You've worked more than 20 years in this field, more than that, I assume, right?
Yes, I'm old enough.
The whole reason, I felt like doing this podcast is I was in Macy's. I saw an elderly couple, but one was 102 and the other was 70. I only know because they vocalized it. And one was the son of the mother. So a mom was trying clothes on, but the son said, "I can't go back there into the fitting rooms." And she goes, "Well, I just think that's ridiculous." So they had this whole conversation about the ridiculousness of not being able to go to the fitting rooms, and this centuria, I don't know what we call them, ladies who reach 100, who made it and was putting on clothes herself. And I wondered, that relationship alone, the son to the mother, and he qualifies for the senior discount without a doubt. So, what's it like to grow old, not to grow up, but to grow down again?
Down, exactly. You're right. To grow almost like becoming a child externally again. Yes, absolutely.
The elderly, it's a topic that a lot of people maybe forget. And I think that is sort of emblematic in how the elderly might feel. There's a tipping point in our lives. And, I'm hitting an age where, I'm now witnessing people I grew up with, parents like actually transition into that seasoned citizen, right? Not just getting the senior card to get discounts when they go out to restaurants, but now you can see it in their bones, you can see it in their skin, you can see it in the way they vocalize things. And the aging process is something I think a lot of us don't think about.
Yes, thank you first for having me, and I thank you for using the word forgetting and forgotten, and so basically people tell me the problem is not that we are forgetting. The problem is that they are forgetting us. The problem is that we are forgotten, really, not just by family and dear ones and friends, but by the whole society. The ones I see, the ones I take care of, are put aside, are put away, kind of, in assisted living places, away from home, away from family. So that word forgotten or abandoned is a theme that comes up a lot in their lives and in their minds.
Yeah. I mean, I think along with that, and there's this idea that, as we age, we kind of outgrow our usefulness. Yes. We, some would even, not some, I think a large number probably think that they burden others, right? Yes. And what's it like for the elderly to go through that? I mean, the transition first, and then after the transition of being useful to useless, right? Not my word, but it is my word, but not the reality. But being able to contribute to kind of needing someone to care for them. It's different than being a child, because the child, the expectation is people care, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So what's that like, the transition, and then for them now they're in that state of
depletion, maybe, but maybe there are two aspects to it. There is a visible aspect, which is the worldly aspect, where they go through losses, but then there is also that invisible aspect to aging, which has a lot of richness in it, which is a treasure. And I'm enjoying that. I have to say that field had taught me so much that it is becoming my school. They are my school. They teach me. They are my mentors. They are my shepherds. And so even though they go through so much losses, really so many losses, that life becomes equivalent to a depletion of everything. They lose physically, they lose mentally, all of us do. They lose in their positions, in their consideration. They lose love. They are less loved by grandchildren. They are, less interesting to people, even to people they work with, where we are, the environment they live in.
I wonder about that, the idea that they're less interesting. And I think that's, I want to say it's short-sighted, because I love stories. And, I was just commenting to my dad the other day, where our family is very deep into genealogy. And it's not just like one person in the family, it's like a legacy tradition. So we have a lot of data. And one thing I was thinking about, as I contribute to that process, is making records of these stories and things that pass with time, right? Like, and that's, for me, that a lot of these people, the elderly, I think that they're especially interesting because they see transitions, they see life across, the ages. And I'm just, who was I commenting to the other day? I seem to forget. It may have been my dad. I don't know, it may have been in a podcast. But it's the idea that my great grandfather commented to my grandfather that you will never see as many changes in the world in your life as I saw in mine, because he went from seeing no flight to people on the moon, and anyway, I'm interested in that and how they feel. How does it impact them? How does it make them feel to not be considered interesting?
Yes, the word I hear from them is emptyness. They go from being everything to everyone, from that to becoming empty and not, looked at or not visited, not, appreciated anymore. Nobody comes and asks them for their opinion anymore. They are marginalized. Of course, we can generalize that to a certain, it's the majority of them go through those kind of feelings. But at the same time, again, that's the visible part. But then the invisible part is that they are really good at so many things, and they are so genuine in everything they express and they do. They are very genuine, very real. They no longer put on an image, but they are themselves more than any other population I've ever met. They don't need to paint anything, like we all do. They are who they are. And that's very beautiful to see and to encounter. It's a very unique encounter when we meet with them. And then with that, they tell you all the special things they have. And I'll mention one person who was struggling so much with depression and a lot of other psychiatric problems, and living in a place she's not interested in being in. She wants to be at home. She wants to do all the things she used to do at home. She never worked, was a mom of 5 children, and not liking where she is completely. Again, not interested in being isolated in an assisted living place. And one day she tells me this as a revelation. One day we sit down, we sit down, and it's always in the form of complaints about the place, about the food, about the other residents. The other residents dress better, talk about work, talk about things she's never lived. And so she considers herself inferior. And one day she tells me, and it was a revelation to her and to me. She tells me, I found something I'm very unique at. I am a very good mom. I've been a mom of 5 kids, and I did it very well. And I am now learning to become a mom to all those who are lost in this place. And she really took this as her mission. She became the mother of everybody who needed her advice, her help, not home, not anymore her own children or her own family, but people who live in that second home where she is, where she's forced to be. And I found that admirable. It's a skill that no one has as much as she does. and she was able to use it to, to her best capacity,
Yeah, I like that a lot. It's people get different types of training. They take different careers on, and one may be a mother and be a career woman, or have a part-time job or whatever, university training or something. But anything we do conditions us one way or another. And with 5 children, this person's probably more developed in terms of patience, or listening, or apathy. I think, the more kids you have, the more apathetic you get. First one, you freak out whenever there's a speck of dust on the ground and they crawl over it, and by the time, the 5th one's rolling around, they're wrestling the pigs out on the farm and no one cares, so, yeah, I mean, she's built a skill set, and it's great to see, someone integrated in community, and like, there's always a usefulness, I think, is one of the messages, for the elderly, and for those who are aging, and maybe that usefulness is not the same that we grew up with. It's not the same that we started with. Maybe part of it, like myself, I mean, hitting middle age, my joints are it's different than when you're reminded that, hey, there is a transition point, and some people may not be able to walk, and some people may have impaired mobility, but okay, so that means they probably can't swing a sledgehammer and work construction or whatever they did in the past, but there's still some kind of usefulness to them. I often wonder if we're part of the problem, there's a dynamic between the different ages, right? Whether it's children, adolescence, adulthood, and then the different degrees of adulthood, and finally, moving into, the senior world. We invented, and maybe we didn't invent this, to be honest. I mean, it probably goes back in time. I'm trying to think of some examples, but we have people who convince others that it's time to go, and we've developed processes like euthanasia, right? Yes. And how is that received in the people or in your experience with the elderly? Just the conversation, whether it applies to them or whether it's kind of how the relationship is between the middle-aged and then the seasoned or senior citizens.
I would like to present a little bit of a paradox that I've seen people go through. And I'll mention a case because it kind of highlights that point very well. A woman who was 101-year-old, losing her own child, her oldest son, who was in Israel, an extremely successful businessman. And we had to sit down together face to face, and she would ask me that question: where is the wisdom in this? Where is God's wisdom? She's Jewish. Where is God's wisdom in keeping me 101-year-old and making me live the days of mourning a child, my own child, my oldest, who I can't remember his age, but I think he was in his 70s. Mm. And it was a huge struggle to talk about that. But then that same woman at the age of 102 lost a grandchild, again in Israel, another son, second son. And then a third son lost his wife here in America to cancer, breast cancer. And again, we would sit down together face to face, and she would tell me, how can there be wisdom behind, or any how can this be tolerable, this unspeakable torture of her that she goes through because of losing so many younger generations? There was no answer, and the struggle or the wrestling with that concept went on and on and on for a long time. This woman lived to be 107. Again, another, yes, very unusual. Unusual everything, unusual age, and she was with it enough. She forgot, but not, she was with it overall. She could have a reasonable conversation. And then one day she gave me an answer. Yes. So one day she gave me that answer, and I didn't expect an answer to all this, but she did. She told me, love is the way we can surmount everything. So love is the secret of life. Mm. Whether we are lost at a young age, or whether we die at a very young age, or whether we die at a very old age, it's all about love. And as long as we are able to accept a pain or any suffering with love, that pain becomes very meaningful, positively meaningful. It's not a wasted time, and it's never a wasted life. And I know the concept doesn't seem to answer the torture she's been through directly, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized that what she was talking about was true wisdom. Love is the only answer that anyone could give to someone going through so many tragic losses. Does it make sense to you?
It does, and it makes me think, because it's a question of the value of life, and I wonder sometimes, do we ascribe different values to different periods, to different genders, to different whatever, and maybe groups of people even. I actually met someone who is, it's hard to say the word nowadays because it's used so incorrectly, but the person was basically a German Nazi. He was someone from Germany who was a physician, but he was talking about, and at a very respectable institution here in the United States, being able to liquidate, more of the elderly for hospital efficiency, because we're just wasting money on, people that are going to go in days, months, years, maybe not decades. Yes. And the other end of that is just such a weird way to view life. Yes. And what you talk about love, I think that the person is whatever. I don't know how that person grew up, but it seems to me that love wasn't present in that person's life. And there may be affection or different types of things that, we get lazy in English and call anything love, right? So, whether it's parents, siblings, romantic, there's all sorts of types of love that we don't qualify in English, but I felt like this person didn't value these humans and perceive them through that love perspective that you spoke of. And the only reason is because the time to heal, like you're in a medical setting, right? Especially people who have terminal conditions, and they don't have to be elderly. You're buying time.
Yes. Yes.
Someone is being treated for, a debilitating condition, and they probably get tired going through the process fighting, but the alternative is to have it over with. And once it's over with, it's done. Like there's no other move you can make. But isn't that medicine to begin with, right? Like, aren't we buying time all the time? Whether, it's out of our power, right? If we're in a health situation that's beyond our control, an illness of some type, or, we think we're healthy, and you know what, maybe we're just as susceptible. Maybe we live in a dangerous neighborhood. Maybe we operate dangerous vehicles. Any number of things can impede life and accelerate end of life. And I think when we think about aging, our conversation is really about mortality and ending, like walking toward the end and, moving into the end of life. You said something to me the other day. And I said it was a great title for your book. That was a unique perspective on aging. Would you jump in and tell us that? Because I want to go on a riff about that topic.
It's a great concept that gives it a positive spin. And when we look at the aging population, it's hard not to see that they are going through an involuntary asceticism. Am I pronouncing it right in English?
Oh yeah, sure. Involuntary asceticism. I mean, we're going to title the episode that.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's great. They don't choose it. They don't want it, but it just happens. And I think it's the biggest lesson of aging for me and for everyone. That's what I see as the biggest lesson and the biggest opportunity too. You said buying time. And I think we are given time through those losses to improve something, to understand something, to get in touch with something, to begin an encounter that wasn't there before, with others or with, So I think that's the beauty of it. I look forward to that period of life where everything is taken away, everything worldly, everything superficial, everything vain, and the only thing left is what's essential. And enjoy that. Enjoy what's essential. See with other eyes, other than the eyes of the senses. The touch with other senses. Really,
Yeah.
Develop that other side of us.
Yeah, and you mentioned earlier when in talking about the elderly, just describing them, they don't they are who they are. They're done, yes, trying to show themselves up. They've lost the patience or the reason. And don't we, it's an interesting, maybe it's what's called a deficiency for this middle age or the from adolescence. Well, children do it too, right? From then on until retirement or whenever we kind of throw in the towel. And now it doesn't matter what car you drive. It doesn't matter what clothes you wear. It doesn't matter how you want to be seen. Just yes, be you. And I think that's a lesson that the elderly can give everyone. Why are you putting on a front?
Yes.
And the idea of involuntary asceticism really speaks to me. For those listening who don't know, asceticism goes back to a Greek term meaning to test, to put oneself through a trial, right? And so when we talk about people who are ascetics, we're talking about people who push themselves or test themselves through different sorts of techniques or exercises. Usually, we think of monks and people who fast, or they engage in some type of hardship. It's a voluntary hardship that helps refine them, right? It's a refining hardship. And it's fascinating because the elderly do it involuntarily, right? Like they're going through countless hardships, and it's almost like they're being prepared.
Yes. For that big step, that biggest step of our life, a bigger step up in a life, which is death.
Right. And it just makes me think. It gives me a lot to think about because don't we have hardship throughout life? Yes, we do. How do we respond to that hardship? And there's any number of ways humans respond. I mean, some let that adversity build their character. Some struggle, maybe they give into despondency, depression, substance abuse. There's any range of response to adversity. And no matter what, we're going to get more as we move forward on the timeline, and it's coming. And whether it's just our skin thinning and being more susceptible to sunburn, or like walking slower, having a delayed reaction time.
Slower too, it's not just the appearance, but also the substance is getting defective also. We think slower, we lose information, we have gaps in our mind. Even if we don't have dementia, there are gaps, right? There are lacunae. But I'd like to highlight also that with that apparent loss, with those apparent gaps, there is something much deeper and much richer inside. And if we turn our attention away from the appearance, away from the superfluous, or the superficial, or the less meaningful, to the more meaningful, it can give hope, and it can bring in another perspective that makes life way more meaningful than before, than when we were younger.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it does. The notion of loss, losing memory, neurodegeneration, like the brain falling apart. I mean, typically the body goes before the mind does, right? Typically, and this is where I think the elderly are very interesting still. They're able to share with us their perception of the world and experience in ways that we can't imagine because they lived before us.
Yes.
And so they will express their experience differently, even if their body doesn't work. But as you said, over time, the brain deteriorates, and memory loss is more frequent. Incidentally, if any of you fear dementia, Alzheimer's, any type of memory loss or neurodegeneration out there, learn a foreign language. This is my plug for everyone out there. Pick up some kind of book and learn a foreign language, and do it the rest of your life. And you don't have to be perfect when you learn the language. Just go through the exercises, because it reinforces different synaptic pathways, and it keeps, it works off of whatever neuroplasticity you have left, but those pathways keep you in the game longer. And there's a lot of research to show that things like Alzheimer's, or different stages of dementia are delayed among those who speak more than one language, especially polyglots, people who speak, let's say, 3 or more languages, right? And those language learning, I know I'm riffing here I'm going on an aside, but those languages could be a matter of speech, and listening. They could include sounds that you're not used to, but they could also include different writing systems and different conceptions of writing systems. So, if you read Russian, it's in the Cyrillic alphabet, or Greek, it's in the Greek alphabet. It's not the same writing system, or it's not the same style of the alphabet. They're both alphabetic. But it's within the same framework. You do something like Chinese, however, Japanese, or an ancient language, things that I'm into, like Akkadian, you're in a different ballpark, and it's using different parts of the brain to read it. So, that all that to say, the idea of loss of memory, and then identity, maybe. How does that work within an elderly community? Because you mentioned people, they lose those around them, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
Well, what happens if they're still there physically, but they're not there anymore?
It's a big puzzle to me. I'm still trying to figure things out, but I'll give you examples that strike me as unbelievable, really unbelievable. So I know many who lost their memories, and we call them advanced in their dementia. It's part of the process itself. The process is very progressive, slowly, but still it progresses. And then at the end of that process, people are no longer living the present. They are no longer aware of the environment. They can no longer recognize children, loved ones. They no longer remember their own work and work line, or even hobbies, or any of that. But then they tell you something that is very striking. All I do is sit down with them and talk about superficial stuff. Are you happy? Simple things. And then the sentence I see repeated by many, and it strikes me as unbelievable. So I'll mention one example, a gentleman who used to work at MIT and had a career of teaching, but he carved marble, and he made statues, and the statues are in his apartment, huge statues. He also painted pictures. He has, his work is everywhere in his apartment. And when I start talking about carving, or in the past, he used to tell me techniques, and we used to talk about those things for hours and hours. It was his passion. But then he forgot all that. He forgot that after he forgot his own children's names, which tells you how much passionate he was about, especially the carving piece. But then he tells you that sentence, and many others did repeat that sentence: I'm happy to be alive. Oh. It's repeatedly said by many of them. And I look at him and I think, if people like the person you mentioned think of uselessness, or of being useless as a being, this man would qualify for becoming useless. And death is a good thing, he's ready for that stage. But then when I hear him say, I'm happy to be alive, it's a concept that makes me really question everything I know and believe and think.
Yeah, it's like, whatever you put gold on a scale versus some other substance, and the gold is going to pull it down. I think the value of life is really much weightier than all these other things that we think are distractions or useless, or, things, just put me out of my misery type of, statements we make. I think it's the centerpiece, right? Like just behind the value of life. And even if I forget my children, I won't forget my carving. That's a great, it's an interesting thing. And I wonder
to talk about that same point also, one thing that is very striking, and I'm sure other people would agree with that, people who play the piano or play any instrument, I'm going along the same line of languages that you mentioned earlier. People who play any instrument can play that instrument until they die, even with a very advanced dementia. It's unbelievable how as soon as they sit in front of their piano, they can play as if they've never had a dementia. We have someone who does concerts in the whole place, and she used to be in the conservatory.
Conservatory.
And she plays beautifully, and until today, and no matter how demented she is, she's able to produce amazing music and melodies, really.
Wow, that's fascinating. I guess we have to have a neuroscientist come on and explain which parts of the brain are collapsing, before, or just how ingrained in the different parts of the brain that's probably the answer, I would think, is, it's so widespread. Whereas other memories, or relationships, may be more localized, something like that. With children, I think we've lost as a culture, at least in the West, it's not everywhere. But typically in the West, we don't have as many multi-generational homes as other parts of the world. It's the nursing home or the assisted living facility versus living with your family. Have you noticed differences in the elderly based on what their familial, as opposed to social structure, but like familial relationships are?
So most of the people I meet have this very huge deception about the outcome of being in an assisted living facility. And they usually tell you about how when their mom or their dad needed them, they lived in their own houses. Mom and dad lived with me. How come my daughter or my son cannot tolerate me? And then we start talking about the fact that she didn't work, but her daughter works, and so she cannot take care of her. Mm-hmm. So we try to kind of make it normalize it, but most of the time the expectation is that children will take care of me and they wouldn't reject me or marginalize me in this place. So this is a huge point of disappointment for them. However, when we look at everything, there are pros and cons. So even though they see it as a negative thing, it's much more enjoyable to be with people like us, like older people going through the same events and having conversations with them than being left in a home until children come back. And sometimes we're boring, we're a burden, so we are treated poorly sometimes, or people don't have the time to even be with us, and it can hurt even more than the alternatives. So sometimes, getting the help of the children with grudge or with the feeling of being not tolerated is harder than the opposite, than the alternative. I don't know. It's just maybe only my perception.
No, it's I think how we've moved as families and how the family structure works is a big part of that conversation these days. If mom is working and she can't help grandma, that's a struggle. Yes. And that's something to be dealt with. But then the opposite end is the person, again, involuntary asceticism is forced into a monastic environment, right? The cell of the assisted living facility, and like one of my grandmothers lived in a, I don't even know, I don't think it was assisted living. It was a senior housing. Yeah. Like she had an apartment. And it was, but it's where all the seniors lived, and they had activities and things, and they would go out and go to lunch at the park and things like that. And, but I always, she had a living room, kitchen, and then she had her bedroom. So it's small. And I don't know what assisted living facilities are like, whether it's in the same sort of format or if there's no living room and it's just a studio. But
yes, sorry.
Yeah, no, I liken it to the monastic cell in a way, right? Where, the monk has maybe that cell's more like a prison cell, thus penitentiary, right? Penance, right? But just following that train of thought on involuntary asceticism, it seems like the elderly, they get an opportunity to be alone with their thoughts because, maybe they have a community through the facility, but they're probably not going to sleep in a studio or one bedroom with many people, two or more. It's probably alone.
Yes, you're right. It's more, they have more privacy, but what I try to help them with is see the invisible part of their ordeal. The visible part of the ordeal is very dark, but there is a lot of light in the other side of the ordeal, in the depth of the ordeal. And that's more important. What's internal.
Yeah. And I think that the internal aspect of it's really, that's what yields a lot of wisdom.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And most of our wisdom literature, whether it's scriptural or even, ancient Near Eastern, the Aramaic, Ahikar, or Egyptian wisdom literature, they all defer to the elder. Hear the words of your father, or if people are going for counsel, they go to the elders sitting in the gate.
Yes.
Right. And the opportunity to be alone with one's thoughts. But maybe, maybe it's not always positive. I don't know. I mean, is it ever destructive if they're alone? Does that solitude, apart from generating wisdom, does it generate any problematic situations?
The way I see it is it depends on the structure of the individual, the psychological structure. Some of them are solid enough. Some of them are very vulnerable. So if someone is living his aging process through depression, it always leads to negative thoughts and to darkness, whereas someone who is more healthy psychologically can grow through it, can thrive through aging. And I think that's what we try to do. My job is to try to heal what's broken, heal the depression, heal the vulnerability as much as I can, so that they would be able to have a different outlook on it. With depression, everything is dark and black and negative. Death meaning lack of life completely, becomes the most the only thing they see, the most appealing aspect, So
Yeah.
I want to say this because I find that they taught me this concept that, people I help. And I hope it makes sense. I hope I say it right also, because I've never even said it to myself. I'll use the word scripture or books, right? Books are made of words. Scripture is the word, the expression of the word in capital W. So I believe that a life lived with love, and they taught me that. And I can expand on that part later if I don't think we have time, but
We got plenty of time.
A life based on love is a word, makes a word on that book of life.
Mm.
And a life that lacks love becomes a non-word, becomes an unspeakable event or an unexisting event, becomes a non-being in a way. And so they taught me that to be part of the scripture of life, let me call it that way, or the book of life, it's not religious. It's almost, I want to say, factual. From part of life in capital, and to become a word in that book of life, we need to experiment, prove, and stand for love as much as we can. Everything we do, and we end up, the outcome of everything we do becomes like, how do you say it in English? So an outcome of love. The word is not coming, it's a mathematical word, but it doesn't matter. If the end result is love, then there is
a product.
A product, exactly. And that product appears in the book of life. So they taught me to be meaningful, you need to love. And I think that's the biggest lesson.
That's a great thing. I think there's two ways to go with thinking about the elderly and the what we can receive from them, like this perspective on looking back on a life and getting the final pieces of advice, right? But this, what you described, I would call the centerpiece, and not a quip or some proverb that is useful, but the reason for being. And yes. I think that's useful for every age, and it's a great reminder. And the elderly, geriatrics, they remind us of our mortality, and often we're disengaged from that reality, and it may not always lead us to the best end while we are yet who we are and not advanced in age. On the opposite end, what can those of us who haven't advanced into being senior citizens, for those of us who are younger, from children on to adulthood, what can we do to magnify the life of our elders? And I've seen things online where there'd be like a nursing home or assisted living facility next to a preschool. And I remember in elementary school, we took a field trip to an assisted living facility, and we made these like crafts or whatever, and we shared them. And we kind of picked different people to share our reindeer that we made out of construction paper and things with. And it was, I still remember some of the faces of those people. And I don't know, what are your thoughts, like in your experience, personally and professionally? What are things that people can do to magnify life and really get the most out of not just helping them, but also being ready to receive the message of love, or however we would put it, um, the product of love. I'm not sure. This is a chapter in your book, I'm sure, but
I should write it down, actually. I
right,
am
it's
thinking
something
that.
like that.
So I think what they lack the most is validation. They feel lack of consideration, and this is because of their situation overall. And any sort of validation would probably make a huge impact in them. So I don't mean it I don't mean it in the form of compliments, because they are too smart and too sensitive to realize that we are making a compliment out of pity, maybe, they are too sensitive, and we have to be very genuine when we sit down with them. We have to mean every word we say from our heart, because they feel it. Even if they won't say it, they will feel it more than younger people, because they are, again, more sensitive, more experienced, and they know. Especially if we are also related. If I'm a child and I'm talking to my mom, she knows all my buttons, all my secrets. She'll know when I'm just saying it out of pity. But all I mean is that if we can find something genuine, very positive about them to say or to highlight, that would mean a lot. It's the consideration, is the place they have in our lives in general, even if we are strangers like me going to visit.
Yeah, it's the idea of someone asking about someone, right?
Yes. Yes.
Even if you relay a message, this person has been asking about you, right? Or they send their greetings, or they send, they say hello, they send their affection. They're just a
recognition, but also you count, and I am spending this time with you because you count, and I'm enjoying that moment I'm spending with you. It's not a waste of my time. I mean it, and I want to be with you right now. It's sometimes we replace the grandchildren who are no longer interested, and we sometimes verbalize it. We even say it like that. Consider me, Margaret, or consider me, any name. It doesn't matter. Your grandchild coming here and sitting with you and being interested in you. It's the consideration, I think, that they lack the most. They feel unimportant.
That's very profound. Well, I think that I learned a lot, and I'm hoping to implement it, in my own life. I know we have, quite a few elderly folks, around us, and it's just a good way to be, and it's a good reminder. Well, Dr. Amani, it's been great chatting with you. Do you have any final thoughts, or that you'd like to leave us with? Any bit of advice or wisdom?
So I'll say this. I know it will be shocking, but if I ever become a demented elderly person, I will know from my life today with them that there is a lot to enjoy in that stage of life. Even with an advanced dementia, even with an Alzheimer's disease, there is a lot to enjoy. If we change our outlook and see what's essential, we see the core rather
That's
than
awesome.
the appearance.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for joining me today.
And thank you for everything you do to everyone I know.
The torture, you mean?
Oh, you're our leader, and I thank you for that.
Something like that, something. Well, thank you again, and I do hope to read a text on this soon. It's a great topic, and it's a great approach. So thank you.